Welcome to Black Hat Windows Security Conference 2002, held February 7th through the 9th in New Orleans, Louisiana. The following videotape was recorded live at the conference and produced by the Sound of Knowledge Incorporated.
We'll probably go ahead and get started. I was going to see if a couple more people might come in so it doesn't look so sparse, but I actually kind of like these smaller, intimate groups. We can kind of whiz through some stuff, and we'll have I think some time for some specific questions and answers, and it looks like we will have time for something that we may not have had time for before. Anyway, welcome to Black Hat. It's actually almost over, so a little late for the welcome. My name's Tim Mullen. I work at a company called Anchor IS, where we attempt to design secure accounting software. It's actually a little bit more exciting than it sounds, but I won't bore you with all of that. What we're going to talk about today is the secure development of web-based applications. We're going to get into mostly code in this session. We had a training specifically on this, which was a full-day training, and it included some host hardening parameters and things of that nature. But I think what we're going to do here is pretty much concentrate on the code aspect of things and kind of give you guys a good idea of how to, or at least an initial concept, I think, of how to properly design your web-based applications so that you can mitigate possible exposure due to SQL injection, URL manipulation, things of that nature. As the slide says, the development of our marketplace, whatever the market actually might be, constantly pushes our developers to increase features on the web for our clients, for anonymous clients as well as authenticated clients coming in to view content on our websites, post content to our websites, etc. Even with the most advanced firewalls, the most up-to-date patches on our servers, an improperly designed web form and an improperly sanitized user input that's acted upon can really open the door wide open for compromise in these environments. Before we jump into everything, I'm going to tell you a little joke. So there are these two guys, best buddies. They're out in the mountains camping, Montana, say. Rough day of fishing, they're all sacked out in their tent, and all of a sudden this grizzly bear comes into the camp, starts ripping everything up, furious. The guy peers out the tent and is going, "Holy crap, I'm getting out of here." Runs into his bag, starts lacing up his shoes. And his other friend goes, "What the hell are you doing? You're never going to outrun that bear." And he says, "I don't have to. I just have to outrun you." That's very much what security is like today. Is attackers will most often go for the low-hanging fruit, the slowest developer out there. So what we're going to do is hopefully give you the tools in which to get you a couple of steps ahead of the next guy. So if anybody's looking for a site to hack, unless they've specifically targeted you, in which case you're in bad shape, hopefully these tools will give you the ability to be a couple of steps ahead, and they'll stop and eat him while you continue on down the path. Let's go over an overview. I'm going to exit out of this guy here. What we have is a real estate application that we wrote. We're all on the same development team now, okay? We're all part of the IT department at www.realestate.com, located in Succafool, California. Now, there actually is a real www.realestate.com, okay? I just chose the name. No way, all characters are fictitious, and any resemblance to anyone alive or dead is purely coincidental. So let's not, and if anybody happens to work for realestate.com, please don't sue me. I don't have any money anyway. Okay, so what we're going to go over is some common vulnerabilities. Client-side HTML, URL manipulation, SQL injection, and then we're going to go over the countermeasures. Most of the black hat sessions, typically a lot of them anyway, are focused on the exploit side of things, right? We show you how to break in. We show you how to break things that are supposed to be unbreakable. Plug for Litchfield there. And basically give you the tools to do this kind of thing. What I want to do here is kind of give you the countermeasures, because to me that's what's really important. It's fine to show you that SQL injection can be done, but at the same time we need to be responsible and show you how to protect yourself from it. And then if we have time and the network is up, I'll show you a couple of vulnerabilities, some real life, real world scenarios. I'm a little torn about doing that publicly now because the one that I was going to use as an example turned out to be worse than I thought it was. And during our class, we saw that you could do something really bad. And I don't know if I want to publicize that now, but we'll burn that bridge when we get to it. Specifically, the client side, we did that. Client-side HTML issues. The easiest way for us to get information from a user is to build a web form, right? Where Joe Blow, anonymous user, comes to the website. He's going to give us some data, and we're going to access a back-end server that will perform some sort of operation using his input, right? In this case, what we're going to do is provide the user with the ability to pull up listings, meaning they want to search for homes to buy. So I've already lost Chip. Chip, come back. So what we're going to do here is just run through a real quick. Right now, this search is kind of broken. We're still developing here. Just give you a little heads up. What we're going to do is go through kind of like a bad, better, best scenario. So we're going to graduate our code that we use to do this, showing you the worst possible thing you can do, and hopefully we'll arrive at what one of the better ways of doing this is. So just to illustrate, I can go up here and select any of these areas. I'm going to select Truckee. These happen to be places in Lake Tahoe. I'm going to say search, and hopefully, good. I should have checked that before I started the class. My SQL server could have been dead from something earlier. So what we'll see here is I've selected an area, and it's given me a result set back, okay? Laser pointer. Fun with cats at home. Okay. Particularly after drinking vodka. Yeah. After the cat is drinking vodka, I mean. Okay. So you see it shows us has 27 properties, some blah blah information over here, and now as a customer I can go back and I have these little info links. So basically what we've done is designed a form that takes this user's input, executes a query on our SQL server over here, and if we look up at the top, obviously in a production environment we're not going to have this, but if you look up at the top you'll see what my SQL statement is. I return it just for purposes of discussion here. We'll see that it's selecting the MLS number, the address, city, state, and zip, or city, state, area, type, price, remarks, and our listing from listings where the status is 0 and the area equals 1. So let's just take a look at the code, the user side code that does this. Here's all my fancy mouse overs and stuff, because I wanted it to be, you know, not just some crappy little form, right? What we see here does the laser pointer bother people or does it help you? Anyone that bothers? Okay, good. Because if so, I was going to get you. Okay. We see what we're going to do here is post this information of the form into a script called getData. Right here is that little drop-down box. Is everybody familiar with client-side HTML programming forms? Everybody does this all day long, right? So the reason that we've done it like this, we've done two things here as a development team that we thought was going to be smart. We're using post methods, which hide the data from the URL as it's getting posted to the web server, right? So as we don't have all these parameters stuck up there in the URL that would be there for a GET request. And the other thing that we've done is explicitly limited what options the person can select, so they can't do anything else, right? Well, of course, that's incorrect. But that's what we're thinking at the time. So we know going in that this is the only thing that the people can select. I'll select the West Shore area, select all properties. We now see that an area equals 3, area equals 3. Everything else stays the same. So really all this client-side HTML form has done is posted a variable called area to the getData ASP file, right? Easy stuff. Well, let's take a look on the server side and see exactly what's going on there. Let me get into my real, that's not it. That's it. In my scripts directory, let's just take a look at getData. Yes, it loads in front page. Don't laugh at me. I just said don't laugh at me, David. The reason is because like if I showed you this in .NET, Visual InterDev or whatever, it might be, you know, I don't want you to have to see this done in some program that you're going to have to go out and buy. Everybody has front page. So if we're going to change stuff, and for purposes of discussion here, this works fine. Does everybody know what an ASP file is? Server side, a server processing file. Does anybody want to know a little bit more about an ASP file, active server page? Bueller, anyone? Anyone? Okay. So here's what this guy is going to do. The active server page is going to return preloaded images to the top for speed, and then it's going to get down here and begin this processing. The first thing that we're going to do is create a connection to the database, right? So as we have a means of retrieving that information. I want to create a connection, create a record set object, and populate that record set object with records, right? So we create our ADODB connection up here, and then I pass it a connection string. You have to have a method of connecting to an ADODB connection has to have some sort of connection string. Has to have some sort of means of getting to the data. Here I've chosen to use the full connection string, which is actually very typical of developers. Chip, you ever see anybody use this? Yeah. We have the provider, the user ID is SA, the password is suckafool, the database is MLS, and the server equals web1. So we're providing the ADODB connection object all the information it needs in order to connect up to this database. Now there are obviously some problems with this. We'll go over those in a little bit. The first of all being that the username and password, not just the fact that the username and password is available in clear text should anyone get hold of this file, but in this case that the username and password is the SA user, correct? What we're then doing, but we're developers now. We've got to get this thing, we've got to make it work. So the first step that many, many people do is to provide a function, make sure it works, then come back and make sure it's secure. Unfortunately, it's the come back and make sure it's secure part that a lot of people miss. Secondly, I'm going to create a variable called SQL, where I'm just going to give it the string value of what it is. This string equals select MLS blah 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 from listings where status is 0 and area equals, and in this case I say request form area. So when my user input, user form is what it's called, when my user form HTML form posts in the variable area here, the getData ASP file grabs that, and it has it in variable form, request.form area. And what I've done here is just taken that and jammed it in on the end of my string value, which results in the string area equals 3. And so far we're okay with that because we think we've limited what people can do over here, right? We then go ahead, execute that statement here, and here's a helpful little feature where I then execute another statement selecting the count of those records. There's other ways I could have done this. But what I wanted to know is, so as the people, before they start scrolling down, I wanted them to know how many properties were found. So in this case, it's 26. So I execute a little select statement that does that. We'll see that this secondary select statement actually helps us when people try to do union statements in SQL injection. I'll show you why in a bit. I think 50% of what I say is, I'll show you why in a bit. We execute that, and we just basically roll through this record set until we get to the end. So let's just take a look here at what we could do. I'm going to write my own user form, save it on the client, which I can do whatever I want with. I'm going to call it user form hack. Well, maybe not. Got me. User form hack. Oh, help. Somebody stop me. I think it's user form hack 1. There. So let's look at the source here. Now I'm kind of doing it this way on purpose because it's very easy to show you SQL injection techniques with get commands, right? Where it's right up there in the URL and I can just start typing and enter whatever I want. So I'm kind of doing it this way on purpose. I'm using integer values on purpose. We're doing all this stuff on purpose just to make it a little bit more realistic. I mean, I know many people use the get method whenever they're pushing the data out to the ASP file, but I think this is actually more typical. So what I've done is created my own value called area, and I know that I know that we use that, right? Because I can just look at the source code for that user form in the first form. I can see everything that we've done there. So I know it's passing the variable called area. So in this case, what we've done, the first trick of all SQL injection techniques is to put my own value in there. So rather than providing the value from a select list that we thought would limit people from putting in the data, what I've done is said value equals 1 or 1 equals 1. Right? So here, let's execute this. Submit. Oh, get line 3. Oh, that's right. I need to change this. This was a leftover. Huh? I know. Stop. Oh, Jim's getting me back. You need to go sit next to Laura and have all of your questions proxied through Laura, because Jim is a ISA ninja. If anyone was lucky enough to catch his stuff or to read his stuff on the news groups, Jim is great. And I was just giving him kind of a hard time with a million, more so Tom, but a bunch of questions that I was launching over there. All right, let me change this file here. I have it here for ease, right? But I would normally be saving it over there. So user form hack. I didn't want that. Is it not there? So there are these two guys in the woods. Okay. I was actually doing it this way. What I want to do is use this now, and for illustration purposes, rather than posting it into get data, I'm going to post it into, actually let me just post it straight into get data. And refresh this guy. Yeah. Okay. So what we've done now is I use the same form, and where before area equals 1 gave us all the areas that were 1, what we have now is notice that the SQL statement is changed. Get it? Where status is 0, area equals 1, or 1 equals 1. So the SQL server has now parsed that out. It's looking at the entire statement, and it's going to get me all these fields where area is 1 or where 1 equals 1. Well, 1 always equals 1. That's a true statement. 1 doesn't equal 2, 1 equals 1. So it's going to give me every record in the database. Now, typically, this would be thousands of records. In this case, it's 135. So we already see that we can execute arbitrary SQL on our server. Anyone not see why this is working? Everybody already know all about this stuff, right? Is anyone listening? Okay. There are these two guys. All right. So now let's just take a look at, and actually, I think somebody reported to us, we thought we had done something, that if you select all areas, nothing happens. Oops, we have a little logic bug. So we need to fix that. So two things that we need to do now. We've got a logic bug that we need to fix, and we've seen that we can do some SQL injection. So what we're going to do now is take a look at get data to, where we've done a little bit more to protect ourselves, hopefully. Well, what we do here is that we need to change the logic of this statement a little bit to accept a 0, because previously we had like an AND logic. Get me where it's this, and what area is 1, and area is 2. An equal, right? An and equal logic. But in this case, if they select 0, we want to get all the properties. So we're going to say where area is greater than 0, because we know it's got to be some area. I'll show you the actual structure of this database in a little bit. Does anyone need to see that now? Would it help them? Anybody want to see the structure now? Okay. So we do a little extents checking. We say, let's assign a variable to this request form. And that variable is iArea. So iArea now equals whatever they put in. If it's 0, then I'm going to have a string say an area is greater than 0. Otherwise, area equals whatever they put in for the area. Then I come down here, same connection string, SQL statement, and again, I jam in this string value on the end of this SQL statement to concatenate my entire SQL string variable. All right? And we still have the nifty little count feature in there. So if we come back here now and we go to user form 2, and user form 2 just happens to call get data to, right? So as I'm not doing a whole lot of editing over here, I'm going to say all areas. Great. So now we see area is greater than 1. Perfect. It still says 0 properties found. I think I rimmed out something. Biggie. R record count. Oh, yeah, that's fine. So let's go back here and just select a 1, Chucky area, search. So we see where that works. However, our get data, our user form hack will still work. Need to edit it. Let's post this guy into get data 2. View the source. Yep. We'll see that I was still able to inject that 1 equals 1 in there, because I didn't do a very good job of looking at my data. I just said, if it's greater than 0, if it equals 0, then do this, otherwise do this. Not real smart. Now, let's talk a little bit about what we can do with SQL injection. This isn't a how to inject SQL to break people's stuff class. It's how to protect yourselves from it, but in order to protect ourselves from it, we need to have an idea of what can be done. Knowing that I can inject arbitrary code in here tells me that I can own this entire server. There's many things that we can do. I don't see this code, so I don't know the user context that I'm operating in. However, the bad thing is that it's an SA user, which is the God user on SQL Server. So any query that I pump into this server from here gets executed as the SA user. I can do anything. If I was malicious, I could append a array equals 1 drop database MLS, execute it, and in that one statement, this entire database is gone. Anybody else who is attempting to access our data won't be able to. In one statement, I can completely hose it. That's just if a vandal does something. If somebody who's trying to get at your data does something, there's some other mean things that they can do. Let's talk about a union statement real quick. I have a couple of different tables in my MLS database. I'm going to select, this is just my query analyzer, okay? This is a client tool that allows me to just throw SQL at my SQL server. Select splat from listings. So you can see here that this is just accessing all the data in the table. And I have another table called blah. And blah has integer value, a invarchar 25, and another integer value. The SQL union statement allows me to grab data from one table and then concatenate it to the record set returned from another table. Did I say that right? So if I want to select the MLS number, the city, and price, I get that. I can union in a select ID blah, blah 2 from blah. And we see what it's done is in the same return set, it's grabbed the data from the other table and given it to me. That can be a powerful method of me circumventing your SQL statement up here in order to grab data from other tables. So let's do something similar to that. I'm going to jump ahead just to kind of show you. Let's go to user form hack 2. We're going to view the source on that. Okay. Let me show you one thing. If my select statement up here brings in fields that cannot be directly, the price happens to be a money value, blah 2 happens to be an integer value, the server can give me both of those values in the same union statement because it can convert it on the fly. But let's say that I don't select price, I select state. And then I try to execute this statement. Well, the first thing you saw it do was actually executed the first part of that statement, but then it gives me an error message saying that it can't convert the invarchar value of California to integer. I'd get the same sort of message over here. And as Jim pointed out, that's because my error reporting on my IIS server is turned on, which is on by default, which means that it gives the client who submits an ADODB connection string or whatever, any error, it's going to give me some good detail on why you got that error. So I would get the exact same error, something similar to it, over here, and then I would know that that third column is an in-car value, right? I can throw concatenated statements at the server systematically and get all the information I need like that. I could just keep saying blah 2, blah 2, blah 2, and it would tell me what it is. And along the way, I could structure my select statement in such a way that it matches up with the number of columns and the data type so as it would execute. An example being, it's giving me the stuff from listings. Maybe I want to select name, credit card number, and expiration date from the customer's file at the same time. And all of a sudden, I get all the credit card numbers or what have you. What I'll show you is here I'm going to say where 1 equals 1 or 1 equals 1. I could actually get rid of that 1 equals 1. Union select, and I'm throwing in a number of convert statements. For the sake of brevity, I'm not going to sit here and I'm not going to hack that statement and show you the return values to where I can concatenate a value onto the end of the statement each time to make my union select statement work. Okay? What I'm doing is using a new function. Was it in 7 or 2000? The variant? 2000 gave us the variant type, the data type of variant. So no longer do I have to worry about stuff like this. I don't have to match up the data type of a second column select to the first column select. Using the variant data type, I just say, convert it for me. I don't care what it was. Here's a value, convert it to whatever this initial column was. And in this case, what I'm doing is matching up. When you see convert SQL variant 0, I'm converting a 0 to a SQL variant of whatever the first data type was. And then I'm selecting the name from the master database's sys objects. Again, the first X number of convert statements are used to match up the number of select statements in my original. Does everybody knows how this union is working? And want me to go into a little more detail? We have time? It's okay? Okay. So let's execute this guy. Oh, I did it again. He's supposed to go to get data 2. La la la. I should have prepped more jokes. I mean, I actually have some more jokes, but they really wouldn't be appropriate, you know what I mean? Okay. I got a little ahead of myself. Let me pull up get data 2 here. Remember that little trick I was talking about, where I'm pulling up that single column in my record set to give you the count? Let me show you it work first. Then I'll get rid of this guy. This is the code that does that. This is the code that does that. Okay. So what I've done is submitted another query now to where not only does it grab the listings, I've done a union select matching up the columns where over here in the remarks field, it's now giving me every name of every object on that database, on the SQL server. Which would give an attacker plenty of information on the structure of that server, the objects in it, what stored procedures you have, what databases you have, what tables you have, everything. Lots of rich data here. all from us being able to allow somebody to do a quick search. What's interesting about the way the ADODB parser works on an ASP page is that even though it's a second request being made, if the same connection object submits another query behind a union query, even that guy has to match. Meaning, I do my first select statement up here with my 9 columns. In my injection, I union another select statement with 9 columns with the properly converted variables so that the statement executed properly. But here, I had a select statement that retrieved a single value. Not that I expect everyone to go through and have secondary data connects made where you change the number of columns being returned on a connection object, but if you do that, a union select would fail. Pardon? In the same SQL statement or like multiple ones over here? And when you say a multiple result set via what? If it's a union that you're first doing, yes, that would have to match too. But you as a developer are going to know whether you have a union or not. You know what I'm saying? What I've done is I've thrown in a union over here. And again, I don't expect, now what this wouldn't do, this wouldn't help you at all if I had put a drop database behind that, right? This is strictly, don't think that this is a magic bullet. You go, hey, wow, I'll just throw in another connection, ADOB connection that creates a record set that's got a different number of columns selected, so as a union statement fails. That's all it does is it makes the union statement fail. I was just showing you that because I find that interesting. It kind of gives us some insight into the way that the parser works. You would probably create that with a separate connection string. If you actually wanted that kind of functionality, you could probably submit a go or you could terminate that connection. So let's take a little bit better look at what we could be doing here. And I think this corresponds with a slide. Let's talk a little bit about the countermeasures here. I've jumped ahead of one, I'll go back to that one. What we're not doing is validating any of this input, and this is where it becomes critical. Any input that's coming in from a third-party source must be considered evil. Every single piece of information that you get that a user submits to you, consider it absolutely evil, and it has to be exercised. It has to be sanitized. If you start thinking that way, you'll catch a lot of this stuff before it even begins. Quick example, I even got Jeremiah with this one. I think he's going to talk about it, so I don't mind busting him. Can you hear me, Jeremiah? He's got an outstanding tool that parses out web forms for you, third party. He can tell it to dump out all of your information. I changed the server header form on my web server to have an image tag, an HTML image tag, rather than IIS 5.0 or Apache 1.34 on Unix or whatever. Whenever he tried to look at my website, I had control of what data he was putting in his browser. And up goes that image statement, and he sees this spinning 3D skull on his screen, and he's like, what the hell? Right? Even things like that, whenever you grab data from somebody else, sanitize it first. So let's look at some ways of doing that. Other things, as far as input validation, we want to do some value or length checking. As developers, we know that the only possible inputs that we want to accept are areas 1 through 6. So we should explicitly check and say, it's got to be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, or 0. 0 through 6. So check the value of it. Or extensive boundaries, like the value length checking would be if you know that you're not going to use more than a 25 character input, check the length to make sure it's 25 characters. And then the extensive boundary checking, host submission limits per unit of time. If you're accepting user input that you actually store on your servers, like whenever people come to, maybe we want them to be able to tell us what they're looking for. I want to be able to find a house with blah, 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 blah. Here's my email address. Somebody contact me. Submit. We've got that data actually being stored on our server someplace. Little bit of checking, we might see that we can actually put 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 characters in that text string that they're accepting and save it. If we don't like them, we can write an automated script that goes through and does about 1 million or 2 million posts overnight that posts that data into their server with the hopes of using up all of the space on the server or something like that. Now granted, normally it would take a very long time to do that, but you get my point, right? In that case, whenever you're accepting these insert commands, you might want to take a look at how many you've had today or in the last hour or something like that and say, you know what? We've had 4 million requests for information in the last hour alone. Something's wrong. And not accept any more user input or anything like that. That's what I mean by submission limits per unit of time. So and we're not going to do any of that particularly, but we are going to go into some of these other features of data sanitation and what have you. So let's look at the code again. Yes, sir. Right. And that's a good, the question was, you have to be careful about doing that because somebody could do a denial of service on your machine. Purposefully knowing that you're not going to accept any more submissions, but which one would you rather have? A denial of service that is based on them crashing the server for resources being used up, or the fact that we would probably be notified in some manner. Somebody would say, it's not just going to stop, it's going to programmatically stop and say, page you. The server would then page you or something like that. But you're absolutely right. So, but that's one of the decisions. What I like is I like to be able to make that decision. If I'm going to stop accepting user input, it's because I want to, not because Chip wants me to, right? So, and that's a valid point, but a lot of this stuff is give and take. Let's take a look at user form 3. Let's not use user form 3. We want get data 3. What I want to start doing now is getting a little bit more control over this data. Did I mention that they told me not to stand right here? They did. They said, Tim, don't stand here. So, hi. Well, it's just I'm close to my code. I don't want to get too far from him. We're going to introduce a couple of new things here. One is a very, very simple object called the regular expression object. It also happens to be very powerful. The regular expression object allows me to assign a variable to the object and then assign a pattern to that variable. And what that pattern does is matches a particular series of text elements, or alphanumeric elements, text. Ones, zeros. Once I've created that expression, I can use a method of the regular expression object to replace anything in that object that matches the pattern with the particular variable. In this case, what I've done is I've said the pattern is anything that's not a number. I want you to match anything that isn't a number and replace it with a null value. Where, this is what we're checking. So what I've done this time is I've taken my I area, and rather than it just being the request form area, it is the replacement, it's the integer value, which this way I know it's going to be a 1. It's the integer value of the resultant replacement of the form area. Let's look at some of the other things that we can do real quick with this pattern, because I think it's a good, let me, oh, that was the wrong one. This is probably kind of hard to see, but just here in the help section, this is in my MSDN library, we can see an enormous number of pre-stored pattern types that we can use. Non-digit characters, form feeds, new lines, any white space, tabs, vertical lines, anything. And then we can do our own custom patterns, stuff like that. Either this or that, so you can use or logic, you can use and logic. It's very flexible. Microsoft did a really good job with this little object. Sir? One more time, I couldn't hear. Oh, absolutely. I'm actually a big fan of Microsoft. I mean, some of the stuff that I say I write an article on Security Focus. I do the Microsoft column on Security Focus. And, sometimes I get a little mean towards you guys. Jim works for Microsoft. But you deserve it. Okay. Wait till the next one. I'll probably get a call from Scott Charney himself. Okay. So here's some of the other just examples of what we can do here. So the first thing we do is we kind of sanitize that input. I strip it out of any characters that I don't want. This would have taken the equal sign out. Right? So whenever I try to inject, area is 1 space, OR space 1 equal sign 1, and maybe another space. Whenever I run that string through this replacement object, it's going to strip all of that out. In most cases, where I'm going to do something evil on your SQL server, and again, most cases, it's going to require that I escape out some way of your normal SQL code, either with a double dash to rim out something or including quotes. I chose the integer here because an integer value is particularly susceptible to SQL injection because I don't have to worry about quotes. Right? A quote would be if I said if I didn't have my areas stored as integer values and rather had them stored as textual values, which really wouldn't be smart in good database programming anyway, but it's done. If I said where area equals quote, single quote, Truckee, single quote, I would probably be programmatically appending that ending quote and the beginning quote to that input, right? You're just going to type in Truckee. I would have to say where area equals quote request form area plus quote. That second quote that I use would kill any SQL injection. It would make that statement fail when being parsed by the SQL engine because you'd have 2 quotes in it, right? Quick example. Where city equals Truckee. Well, that's going to error because it's not. Right, so it gives me everything. Oh. That's very secure SQL right there. From listings. So there's everything here. Programmatically, that would be where my string would end, and then I would append that single quote to it again if I was concatenating string values together to make that SQL statement, right? As a programmer, as a hacker, I'd probably have to throw another single quote in this string in order to terminate it properly, and then throw a double line in there. See how it turned to green? If I could inject a single quote in a double line, then I'm going to change the entire logic and rim out everything beyond it. So even if you had where sit equals this and area equals 1 and you're an authenticated user, all of that language would be terminated from my SQL strings parser. What the regular expression object does is it would strip out that single quote, it'd strip out double quotes, it'd strip out dashes, it strips out all of that stuff. That'd make it really hard for you to inject data into my system. I would say that the replace statement, except for integer values, but even in that case, the replace statement here, just that one little piece, would fix like 90% of the potential that people would have to inject SQL. Not all of it, obviously, but a lot of it. It wouldn't fix the drop database, right? Because there's no quotes, there's no anything. Where 1 equals 1, space, drop database, blue. Pardon? Exactly. It's just another expression. It's valid. I thought I had to put a semicolon in there, but Beth, someone from one of my classes, showed me that that was incorrect, that you don't need a semicolon to concatenate a secondary statement onto it. And I was like, damn.
What does the parser be on during the next statement?
Oh, the whole, I mean, there are a tremendous number of pre-stored SQL codes that are valid. What it does is steps back and looks at the entire code, what it considers a syntax, and will break it out as it does it. The actual method that SQL uses to parse it, I'm sure, I mean, I couldn't go into that. I mean, it's got to be complex, though, because it's pretty, there are a lot of different things that I can do. But like another select statement, it knows that a select needs a where and a from. I mean, it parses all that stuff out. So if it's smart enough, it'll figure it out. That's why I was thinking the semicolon was necessary, but it's not. Well, let's try it.
Well, you've got your where and all the elements of the select. I guess the space after you've got commas inside your where. So as soon as you've gone past say 1 equals 1, comma, then another parameter, and then space, and then it starts the next statement. You could go for proper SQL syntax possibly. Does anybody have a SQL parser that's that advanced?
Well, I mean, their parser actually does. What it's going to do is it's going to parse in and say, is this valid, is this valid, is this valid, is this valid, is this valid? Oh, this is valid, execute. Okay. Is this valid, is this valid? You'll see I actually got 2 different result sets with no separation, no anything. Select this, where this equals this, select this. It just doesn't care. I mean, obviously it cares, but what we're doing is as soon as it encounters a valid statement, it's going to execute it. And in fact, even if I said, I think if it errors out in the second part, select foo from blah, I'm thinking it actually executed that first statement. I'll have to check on that, even though it didn't return it. Maybe if I did it like that, it would. Now, if I put a go in there, then I know it would, right? Sir? Say it one more time. I can't hear. Oh, yeah, that's the grid. Let's see. If I turn on the statistics, it will.
Wouldn't it make sense for the web page to parse it the exact same way the SQL Server does?
Well, there really is no web page parser in this regard. I'm just creating a SQL. I'm just creating a string value and sending it to it. Let's get to that. Let me.
Independent union statements, we should do it the same way the server does. Have you heard of anybody going at a project that would maybe
let me show you a couple of more things, and it'll probably answer that for you, because that's what we're going to do. So, and again, I mean, there really is, we could do just how to inject SQL, but it really wouldn't be about that. I would just be giving some little class about how to structure valid SQL statements. That's really all we're doing, is we're structuring valid statements. The other end of this is, again, as Jim pointed out with these error messages, I wouldn't necessarily just get this error message, but I could have said group by area. The ADODB, the OLEDB provider would tell me, you can't group by this from this table. Even if I had no idea what you were doing, if I could inject some SQL using group by clauses and other aggregate clauses that I would inject, we could disassemble the entire back end just from the error messages it tells us. You know, this is a character value. Oh, good. Okay, character. Oh, you can't do that from the listings table. Ooh, listings. Oh, the MLS database doesn't accept this, you know, and you just start collecting more and more information. So let's see what else we do. After we sanitize the data, removing any, let's say we did want to accept character data, I'd still remove single quotes, double quotes, dashes, semicolons, stuff that we know we don't need, right? After we sanitize the input here, we have what, 15 minutes to go? Thanks. After we sanitize the input here, I'm going to do some extents checking. I know that at this point in the game that iArea is an integer. If somebody has gotten around this somehow and thrown some characters in there, which they're not going to be able to do the replace statement, I still have a little bit of power here, is that I'm making that an integer value. If it can't make it an integer value, it'll error out, which might be good for me. Better to have it error out. I won't be showing them any error messages than them actually injecting SQL. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to say, is area greater than 6? Because over here I could put a 7 in. Right? I could say 7, it'd be valid, it'd go right through my cleanser because it's all valid. I could say, well, no, I don't want a 6, I want it to be a 7. 7's not going to hurt us in this case, but we don't know that always. But we do know that it has to be 0 to 6. So we check for that. If it's greater than 6, make it a 0. I don't care what it is, it's a 0 now. And then at that point, we know. Oop, logic error. What have we done there? What if it's negative? Yes, sir. Well, that's a good case. You know, I might make it 0 just in this case so as they still see all of my stuff. It depends on your mindset at that point. You're absolutely valid. What I would probably do is have something else happen, like a big skull or flipping them off or something like that, where you say, you know what, the only way that this could be a 7 is if you're messing with me. You didn't do it the way I wanted you to do it. I know you're screwing with me. Piss off. That might be one thing you do. You might want, if it's some programmatic method of some robot out there, somebody wrote to collect all of the data for them at night so as they don't have to sit there on your website, you may want it to just return all the record sets just so as you don't piss anybody off. It all depends on what you want. It's an absolutely valid point. You see what Jim said? He said, why are you making it 0? Because if it's 0, they're going to get everything. Like, well, that's just our choice. That's what I made here. So here we go. We've gone through here. And now what I'm doing is I'm building this SQL statement based on cleansed and extents checked data. If it's this, then this. If it's this, then this, this, then this. I've kind of limited what it can do. Now I'm assigning values based on everything that I know it is. And I'm building this string variable. The other thing that I'm doing here is building in some functionality with additional logic to allow us to search for other types of things. The first two submission types of price and area are equals this, or this equals this. As we all know, whenever we're designing these applications, we have more complex logic than that. Somebody wants a range of prices, in this case a house between $1 million and $3 million, we need to build in this between logic. So what we're doing here is building a string. Building strings is still wrong, by the way. We're still doing this wrong. So we come down here, we execute this statement here. We have so far pretty much limited, programmatically limited what these people can do. But I'm still, at the end of the day, connecting up to this database as the SA user. I'm displaying the information in text format, which is bad, and I'm executing an ad hoc query. Even though, if everybody's playing right at this part of the game, whatever they're submitting over here, even though we're doing a pretty good job now of stripping it out, validating the extents, we have performance problems because we're doing an ad hoc query. And we also have that ad hoc query being executed in the context of the super user. I hate the word super user. Did I mention that? Yeah, thank you. Is that what SA stands for? I thought it was the guy who wrote it. His name was Sa. Would be Sue, which would be far too close to what Microsoft would do to us whenever we try to publish a vulnerability. Okay. Ba-doomps. I'm here all week. Okay. Since we're running out of time a little bit, I'm not going to submit each one of these. I mean, I'll at least show you that our logic works. So let's go to, what are we on? Get data 3. Let's go to user form 3. And I'm going to select everything. Great, I got 122. I guess I was supposed to get 135. But let's say where everything is area 2, area 1 rather. And now let's make sure our between logic works. And it does. So the resultant SQL statement, after all this stuff, has concatenated a string value that says select MLS address blah, 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 where error is 1 and price between $500,001 and $750,000, which we can all afford, right? We're in the IT industry. Oh, there's Beth. Beth, I talked about you earlier today. Beth's the one who told me about the semicolon. See, I thought you had to have that, and you don't. Okay. So let's hone this down a little bit more. I think it's time to introduce a new variable, a new object. Ooh. So far up here, we've still done a relatively good job of stripping out the data, blah, blah, blah. We've sanitized it, validated it, what have you. We've assigned string values. We were still using an ad hoc query. This is going to, and in a lot of cases, we're going to have to do ad hoc queries. I mean, it's just the way it is in the real world. Yes, everything, as opposed to having strongly declared procedures, stored procedures, and executing everything like that, okay? So I'm just going to show you how a good way of doing this is. SQL has an execute SQL stored procedure available to us that is specifically designed for the execution of ad hoc queries, where we can build a string value and submit that string value to the SQL server that gets parsed and checked, and we actually get a performance benefit out of that a little bit. What I'm saying now is that my SQL code equals execute SQL, and then I'm defining the SQL statement where SQL equals, where status equals 0 and area equals at area. The at area expressly defines that as a parameter value. Okay? So it knows to expect a parameter there. Part of the other parameters for the execute SQL stored procedure, as we see here, are the declarations of that parameter and the value assignment of that parameter. So I'm saying, get it where area equals this parameter value. That parameter value has to be an integer. See where we say and area equals int? So now we're starting to define this a little bit better. So even if somebody throws in some string data in there that happens to get past all of this crap up here, we still have the SQL server who's going to parse that and go, wait a minute, I'm expecting an integer here. You can't give me character data inside of this guy. And then I assign it right there. At area equals I area. And again, I area was the resultant of the extents checked form replacement using the regexp. This is starting to approach something that's a little bit better, right? Do you have any questions about the execute SQL? What's still our problem? Correct. If people see that. Some people say, well, no, nobody's ever going to see that. Let me show you what happened on a Microsoft site recently. On the certified partner site, which we happen to be certified partners at Anchor IS, somebody did something that regurgitated this code as an error. This was code generated by some of the .NET servers. And of course, we couldn't help but go through it. This was actually on the net. I almost remembered what the line number was. Looky, looky. Line 444. No, you can't see that. Connection string. In case you were saying, people don't really do this. The password is MSCP data, the database is that's the name of the server, and that's the name of the user. I got the username, the password, I got everything I need. I got everything. Pardon? Right. And it's over HTTPS, which means that I can securely try to hack their system without their IDS going off. Now, if they had Jim working for them, what they probably would be doing was have it be HTTPS all the way up to the ISA server. Then the ISA server would have HTTP redirected to the internal site so they can be looking. So as you're not going from client to web server in an encrypted session, so as all my SQL injection is encrypted, everything that I'm trying to do, you'd never be able to see. Yes, sir?
Actually, I don't recommend people do that.
Really? Why?
Well, because you have an HTTPS session between me and you, and we put Sandy in the way, then I
Well,
don't know that I'm talking to you.
that's correct. But hopefully that you're on the trusted net at that point. But I like the way you think. Yeah, and you shouldn't. You shouldn't trust the trusted net. Right? One other thing that might be embarrassing, which I thought was really kind of bad, being, look at this. Their password is porn online. That's a little cheesy. Doesn't give me the nice warm fuzzy feeling of Microsoft having, it's like, oh, password's porn online. Great. Certified professionals. Yeah, Netscape engineers are weenies. But at least that's true. I'm kidding. Okay, so we're running out a little bit of time. I want to get in here real quick and show you really a much better way of doing this. Got just a couple of minutes. I'm leaving this code in here just for reference. Still not the best thing to do because I'm using SA and password as suck a fool and blah, blah, blah. But what we've done now is we're creating a connection object, and we're using the command object now to talk to it. Command object is very strong. Now this presupposes now that what we've done is gotten our act together and written a stored procedure on the server. And what that stored procedure has is all of that SQL text in it, It's looking for an integer value of area, and that's all that the stored procedure is going to accept. I'll show you that real super quick. Super quick. Well, I'll do it in my query window. I have a stored procedure out there called getArea that accepts that data, and where area equals 1, as you see over here in this 5th column, 5, whatever it is. If I try to put area equals blah, it's going to error out on me. So in this case, all it's going to take is this guy is an integer value. So that's all from the SQL Server standpoint. No matter what I'm doing over here, that's all he's going to take. So that's kind of cool. So knowing that we have that, let's take a look at how we've structured this command. Yikes. The command object, and this is really what you guys should be doing. When you walk away from here, when you go home, use the regular expression object and use the command object. If you're doing ad hoc query strings, use the execute SQL stored procedure. This is really, I probably could have just said that and we could all go drink. But, we had an hour and 15 to kill. We set the command object's active connection to our connection that we created earlier. That's the ADBO connection. The command text is spgetArea. That's the text that's going to be forwarded onto the SQL Server inside of this command. The command type is forced, and now it expressly knows that this is a stored procedure that I'm executing. Okay, so it's not ad hoc. It's like, this is a stored procedure. Treat it as such. I then create a parameter called area. That 3 tells it that it's integer type, and the value of it is iArea. And I append that parameter to the parameter object that I've created in the previous statement. Then I execute that command object. Well, now what we've really done is strongly type this thing. All they can do is we have a getArea. We have stripped out anything that they're putting in. We've made it an integer. We've checked the extents of it. We've now packaged up that variable into a command object parameter where we have said to get the area as a stored procedure, and the area is that integer, and then we execute it. And that really, really starts to arrive to a place of securely passing data back and forth. Because we've done it on both sides. We're checking, this is what you were talking about, right? This is on the web side. Before it even gets passed to the server, we've really tightened it down. Once it gets passed to the server, since it's a stored procedure, is expecting it to be in a particular format. The last thing that we want to do is get outside of our SA user. In this case, I just have a data source name called MLS. That data source name uses a trusted connection. What we've done now, and it's going to take me the segment's over, but it's going to take me another 5 minutes to explain if anybody needs to bail. I haven't been following my PowerPoint presentation, but you've got them all in your book. I'm going to wing it. I'm winging it for the rest of the 5 minutes. SQL Server supports 2 types of authentication, mixed mode authentication and integrated authentication. Mixed mode authentication requires you to create SQL users on the SQL box that people use to log in. SQL uses that list of people as the valid user base. There's problems with that. You can't log people out based on X number of login attempts. You can't require passwords. You can't require passwords. You can't require complex passwords. Things of that nature. Did you have a question, sir? No? I was watching you. NT authenticated authentication allows you to base all of the access to the SQL Server on an NT user account, which affords you the management functions of being able to lock out an account if it's had X number of attempts. You can require complex passwords. You can require them to change them. It also kind of gets us outside of this one user, every user mentality of every single query being executed in the context of the SQL administrator, the SA. What we can do now is we can impose permissions. If we had more time, I'd show you all of that stuff. We're not even going to get to do the vulnerabilities. But what we can do is say the anonymous user here is part of a public role, or we can give him specific permissions himself so that all they can do is they have read access to a view that this data is based on, and they have execute permissions of this stored procedure. So even if they do hop outside and can execute some arbitrary commands, the permissions now are going to be bound to them based on their user context. That's a strong thing to do. Many times, it's a difficult thing to do because you've got third-party applications, you've got Commerce server, you've got BizTalk server, anything that kind of requires mixed mode. So on the one hand, Microsoft tells us, oh, well, if you're using mixed mode, you're an idiot. And on the other hand, they're telling us, well, if you want this product, you have to use mixed mode. Okay, so there's a little bit of a, what do we call it? Chip calls it, they don't practice what they preach. So what we've done now is we finally arrived to a place that we have a trusted connection that has strong ACLs put on it that allows them to only do what we want them to do, and I didn't get to show you all of that. That person can maybe execute this SQL command, but not other SQL commands. We're hiding the connection string. We are sanitizing, we're sanitizing, typing, extents checking, value checking. We are calling the data now in a strongly typed command object, passing the parameter over, and then executing that statement to provide the record set. Any questions on this? Anyone? Bueller? Anyone? Thank you. Good night. Actually, that's really about it. Yeah. If any